Hello and good morning or good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. Thank you all for joining us. It's so great to see so many faces, our regular EuroSTAR webinar attendees also. We're looking forward to a great talk today with Leanne Howard. This is our second talk in the Test and Quality webinar series. If you haven't signed up for Adam's AI talk tomorrow, there is still time to register. All talks will be available to watch on demand on EuroSTARHuddle.com. It is free to join, and as a member, you have unlimited access to all the ebooks and webinars from test experts, as well as thousands of blogs from the community. Thank you to iSQI, the partners of Test and Quality in Dublin, for supporting these webinars. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, please ask in the Ask a Question section, and please remember to upvote all the questions that you would like to be answered. And remember to join the conversation, say hello, tell us where you're listening from in the section here on the right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Leanne Howard has over 30 years experience as a test manager, principal test consultant, and is the Global Business Agility Practice Director at Planet Testing. In her consultancy role as the author and chief examiner of the Agile and testing courses and exams, Leanne has gained a unique insight into issues and frustrations beset teams and individual implementing or seeking to uplift Agile processes. Leanne volunteers her free time to foster better harmony and alignment within the larger IT community as a member of the Australian Testing Standards, the TMMI Foundation, and the ANZ Testing Board. She also writes articles and speaks at events, sharing her insights in her craft as voted ICT Woman of the Year by her peers. Hello, Leanne. Great to have you here today.
Hi, thank you very much. What a great introduction.
How are you today, Leanne?
Yeah, good. It's my evening, so I've had a full day of work. It's a bit dark outside, although it feels cold here at the moment, although I just checked and it's not actually 19 degrees. So
wow. That's a very hot day for us in the EU. So, Leanne, I'll hand the screen over to you now, and you can share it away. Just a reminder to everyone to remember to take answer or ask questions throughout the webinar in the Ask a Question section, and we'll answer them at the end. And just a reminder as well to answer the poll as well. Now, we can see your screen now, Leanne.
Excellent. So let's get started because I have tons of things to share with you. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen. I know my inbox is bombarded with webinars and podcasts and virtual conferences. So thank you for making the time to have a listen. So I'm going to share some tips, tricks, practices that myself and the teams that I work with use. Some of these you might already know. In fact, I'm hoping that you know some of these, but some of these may be new to you. And please share if you know or have used these techniques and tips. Share how you're using them. That would be really great to see. So as I said, I'm going to share a lot of information. So please don't feel overwhelmed. Maybe just pick one thing to focus on and make that your takeaway for the event and have a go and experiment with it. So continuous learning journeys are really important right now. We're being asked to work in completely different ways for some of us. Sometimes, you know, we're feeling outside of our comfort zone, and We're even doing things that we weren't doing a few weeks ago, or maybe even a few days ago. So it's important to acknowledge that, what is happening around us, but we need to remain positive. It will be over. So we need to come out the other side, but it will be different. But let's all work together and make sure it's a good different. So there are amazing innovations happening in our industry. There's new products being released in record time. But we've all seen the news around some of those quality issues that have been happening around performance and security and accessibility as we all move into a far more digital age. But when we have a chance to look back, let's reflect on this and let's all have something that we can say that we've accomplished. Maybe it's a certification that you've been putting off. Maybe it's learning a new technology, or maybe it's learning some new skills, learning how to listen to how the people around you are feeling. Or maybe it's even something not IT related. Maybe it's learning how to play the guitar or how to bake a cake. But let's make sure that we can look back and say we have accomplished some really great things. I'm going to share my contact details at the end. So let's continue learning together. Some of the tips and tricks I'm going to share are not my ideas by any means. And they're ones that have evolved with teams that I've worked with and ones that we've experimented and have worked for us. So I'd like to share those with you. And I'd also like to give a big thank you to all of the teams that I've worked with that have themselves contributed in effect to this webinar I'm sharing with you. So if you want to be an excellent leader, make sure you're surrounding yourself with excellent people. You always have an opportunity to learn from everyone. So very quickly, how did my Agile journey begin? I think, the kind of mindset that Agile resonated with me. I look at things in a very pragmatic way and try to find solutions. So a lot of the practices in Agile suit the way I work and the way I think. So just to share a little story with you to illustrate that, I went to work with a team really back before Agile became very popular, and this project was definitely a monster waterfall project. The team that I inherited was about 40 testers from various different skill levels. I had some business people that had never done testing before and some highly skilled testers. They were really struggling at this point. They'd been in the project for quite a few months, so I didn't join right at the beginning. But they all felt that they were kind of spinning their wheels. They had a database of questions which had hundreds of questions in which they weren't getting answers for. They'd written their test cases, but they really weren't confident about the information that was in there. And they'd also started doing some execution, even though, as I said, they weren't really confident about some of the tests that they had. But they were all feeling very frustrated because the software wasn't working. There was lots of defects. I'm sure a lot of you can identify with this type of scenario. So one of the things that I'm very keen on is about visibility. So we made it visible. We had a great big whiteboard in the middle of our team, and every day we met together and talked about where we were, how we could help each other, what was blocking us. Now, in the beginning, it was quite a challenge. Not everyone on my team was on board with having this visibility. We all know that some people prefer not to share that kind of visibility. But we had some others that really embraced it. So the first few meetings, I felt like I was the only one talking and really trying to draw the information out from the team. But as we moved on, I really didn't need to be there because the team were collaborating. They were talking about what they could do. They were offering to help each other. It was really, really a great team. And many of those people in that team are still connected with me, even though it's some long years since we were all together in that team. And a lot of them have sent congratulations to me recently because I've reached my 15th year anniversary at Planet. So I think that's quite an achievement in this day and age. So that's just a little bit about me. Let's start with the presentation. So hopefully you're at the right presentation because the title gave a little bit of a clue about what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to briefly look at what yesterday looked like. I'm going to really focus on what today is going to look like and how we can help each other. And a little bit about, it's really a guess because I don't have a crystal ball, but what my guess and I think more about what my hope is of what tomorrow is going to look like. It is important, though, that we don't forget about yesterday. We need to learn from how we did things in the past, look at how we can do things better in the future. And of course, we need to not forget to celebrate our successes and keep doing those, obviously. So I've just picked out a few things about yesterday. I think a lot of us, and certainly from working with a lot of organizations, there was a lot of us that are working still in a hybrid model. So large upfront requirements gathering, traditional test planning, traditional test strategies of pages of documents. Sandwiched in between, we were maybe working as scrum teams or maybe using a bit of Kanban. And then there was large periods of time where we would be doing integration or user acceptance testing, and maybe even not even involving our users, and testers being the surrogate users, and long periods until these products were released. Also, many teams have been experimenting with Agile, but they're not really seeing the benefits that they read about in the textbooks or on the podcasts or in articles that they read. And they're certainly not getting all of the benefits. Maybe some people are not even bought into that journey. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's definitely not a silver bullet. And it does take work. So hopefully I'm going to give you some suggestions on how you can work on that. I was starting to see a lot more face-to-face communication, which is one of the 12 principles, number 6. So the most effective and efficient method of conveying information to and within development teams is face-to-face communication. So that's great. We do definitely want that communication and those communication channels. There was also a lot more collaboration happening. And again, that's a reflection of the manifesto where we're talking about customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and also echoed in the principle, the 4th principle, about business people and developers must work together daily. Many teams were still using test cases and also being blamed as the blockers for user stories not being completed in their iterations. That's not the only reason why in writing test cases, but certainly could be a contributor. So what can we learn from yesterday? We still do have to have some level of upfront requirements gathering because we still need something to be developing and testing. We still do need strategies and plans, but they do look different than what we may have been used to. And I'm going to look at those a bit later. We do have face-to-face communication, but it's now much more about virtual face-to-face communications. We do also have collaboration, but it's in a different form. We're using much more tools now, messaging, hangout rooms. I've still seen teams simulate water cooler activities and tea room conversations, and maybe even bringing a bit of social chat at the beginning of the meetings. And we do still have to capture our tests, but maybe in a different way. And I'm going to talk about that as well. And that's part of the poll that we're running. So we'll have a look at those answers a bit later. So please make sure you're voting on the poll. So that's yesterday. What does today look like? And as I said, I am going to spend more time on today. So today, it seems like is virtual everything. So our new remote ways of working are prevalent throughout how we are working today. Although in some countries, the rules are obviously being relaxed a little bit. Today is about accelerated quality. It's about doing more with less, but still having the same levels of quality. It's definitely about a focus on the Agile Manifesto, the principles and the values. And also, I hope today is also about making sure we get that balance of our, social life and work life. And we're also having a little bit of fun. So let's kick off with some fun. This is my team, and I did get permission to show this slide before I did. So this is one of my virtual teams, and to try and maybe give ourselves a little bit of light relief, we do a number of different things. As you can see, the team is here dressed up, and that was at the time, you can probably guess, when the toilet roll scarcity was happening. So when we're having our team meetings, there's still some basic rules that we need to apply. And that applies for our testing team meetings, as well as any of the other meetings that we might be attending as testers. So agree your way of working, still have an agenda and a purpose. Maybe use the technique, which I find really, really helpful, which is a parking space. So that you don't go completely off track and you stay within your time slot. If there's areas that are outside the agenda, put them on a parking space, but don't forget to go back and look at them afterwards. And always make sure you're prepared before you go to a meeting. So respect the speaker. One conversation at a time. I know that's a little bit more difficult when you're using virtual communication. Mute when you're not speaking, because we all know we don't want to hear those background noises. And stick to your start and end times. If you've got really long meetings of over an hour, make sure that you're putting in a break there. So be careful with recording and make sure you get everyone's permission. Use technology as an enabler. Use breakout rooms, use flexibility as much as you can possibly do, and be inclusive. So let everyone have their say. So just some quick brush up on meeting etiquette, because we're more and more involved in meetings these days. So one of the topical meetings for us as testers is your iteration planning meeting, or maybe your sprint planning meeting if you're using Scrum. So I wanted to share with you how I work with the teams to do the planning. Now, normally I would do this on a whiteboard and build it up over time, but I just wanted to give you a kind of snapshot of something for you to have a think about. So I actually use this as my plan. I draw it up with the team on a whiteboard, take a picture of it, and that becomes our test plan. Don't forget though, the test plan is a living document. I know historically, those test plans have gone in a directory and probably never ever referenced again. But it is important that it is a living document. And as we discover new things or learn and experiment, we do go back and update the plan, even if it's just to annotate your diagram. It's a really effective way to capture your planning, and it will obviously evolve over time. I do have a template which I use and take into most meetings, just so that we make sure that we cover everything in our planning session. And I'm going to share a couple of tips with you about that in a little bit. So you also may have a agile test strategy, but it's definitely going to be more lightweight. It may be at an organizational level, but it is important, again, that we reference back to that test strategy. And if we have any variances for our particular project, maybe, or even if we're just varying it for this iteration, it is important that we document those variances. And a lot of strategies that I've seen, a lot of the document, which can be a large number of pages, is full up with practices. Take those practices out and put them onto a wiki so that people can refer to them. And again, they need to be updated and reviewed at regular periods of time. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a technique a bit later on about where we can do that update. So I'm going to share another little story with you. I went to join another team. I was actually doing an agile health check for the whole team because they were in iteration 6 of 2-week iterations, and the team hadn't actually delivered anything at this point. And there was a lot of finger pointing that the reason that they hadn't delivered was because of the testing. And digging under the covers, as you can imagine, it wasn't all testing's fault. Yes, there was things that testing could have done better, but there were other things as well. And one of these challenges of the project was a gentleman which I'm going to call Pete. And the whole team was sat together on a great big large table, which was great, except for Pete. Pete was sat on near the team, but on a different table. And when I did the interviews for the assessment, everyone pointed the finger at Pete. He's not a team player. We can't talk to him. He's not helpful. But actually, they hadn't actually taken the time to find out why this was happening. And just a quick conversation with Pete. In fact, it was about fishing, which I know nothing about fishing, but I noticed a fishing picture on his desk. And just that opening of the conversation, I realized that Pete, although he was on the team, he was also covering a whole load of high severity, business as usual activities. So the couple of times that the team had approached him, he was deep in analysis for a production defect and maybe had not used the right verbiage of conveying that. But actually, Pete was really, really helpful in helping the team once we got over that. And he was a wealth of knowledge. He'd been with the company for a very long time, and he was more than happy to help the team. So I would encourage you to, explore these things. Things are not necessarily exactly what you're seeing on the surface. So the iteration planning task is a great way to get the whole team involved. And you as testers can really contribute to the planning so that you're not just getting the tests at the end of the iteration, you're getting them continuously throughout the iteration. So what are some things that we can use in our iteration planning? So I've come up with 3, I'm calling them checklists that I use for my planning. Hopefully, some of these you might have already recognized. So the first is the testing quadrant, which was created by Brian Merrick and extensively used by Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin. The version that I have, just before anyone posts any comments, does not have the 4 quadrants labeled there. And in fact, I actually remove it on purpose, because what tends to happen is people use the quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3 to think that they have to do them in that order, and they end up doing a mini waterfall. So I actually remove that from my checklist. But these are some great things that you can include as part of the conversation in your planning activity to make sure that we are getting the right level of coverage, that we're getting the right split between automation and manual, that we are using the correct tools, and that we're really business focused. So you need to iterate through the quadrants rapidly, working on really small increments. So maybe write the tests or automate the tests on a small chunk of the feature, work with the developers to develop the code, or even help the developers to write these tests, because they may be at the unit level. Once the test is passing, then maybe we automate some more tests to give greater level of coverage and look at those maybe negative scenarios that are not covered in those initial tests. Do some exploratory testing, maybe do some security or load testing on it, but this is on very small chunks, and then go through the whole process again. And we can even start on the quadrant 4, which is the ilities section, so bottom right-hand corner. We could even start with some performance testing and do an architectural spike on that right at the beginning of our project. So use this as a checklist to feed into your planning and to feed into the way that you are working. So hopefully that's one that a lot of you have already seen. The next one is taken out of the ISO standard 25010, which is the quality attributes. And it very much reflects the ilities quadrant from before. So yes, we do adhere to the standards in Agile, which is often a myth, I guess. So we can use these for regulatory and compliance projects. Also, a little reminder about ISO 29119, which is the testing standards, which does have some really good Agile templates and Agile ways of working. Although I must admit, I do use a leaner template than possibly in the standard. And I use that template as an accelerator for a toolkit that I take to organizations. Also, not directly related to that standard, but I also use a lean way of representing a strategy. So possibly as a one-pager, although it's a large one page. So similar to a lean canvas. So looking at what are our product risks, what are some key metrics, what's the value that we are trying to achieve, and what is our flow, etc. So a variation on that lean canvas. And thirdly, this is something new that I'm developing. So I'm calling it the Agile Continuum, for want of a better word. It is a work in progress. So again, I would really appreciate your feedback. And if you want to learn a little bit more, then contact me. So in essence, it's talking about, we discover something, we build it flexibly, and then we study what we've built and iterate around. And the center, which looks a little bit like a cloud, are the things that we should be doing all of the time. And the blue circle around are some activities that we should be thinking about doing. So again, we can use this as our checklist. So just to expand a little bit more on the iteration planning, we can also do remote PI planning for those of you that are working in a safe environment. And I've just given you a couple of tips here if you're trying this for the first time. So make sure that you have really good facilitators and they do a bit of a dry run. They're there to monitor the questions as you go through the day. In the planning meeting, make sure you have clear working arrangements and continually iterate through the event. If you can, try and simulate what it looks like in a physical environment. So have your canvas set up as though it's tables in an auditorium, and have your Scrum Masters supporting the team. Make sure there's some clear communication pathways. So have channels for the facilitators, for all attendees, for individual teams. And make sure that everyone has access to the slides. So make sure you loaded them up beforehand. And give plenty of time for team huddles. And bring people back together frequently so they can share what they're learning. And importantly, make sure you're doing that continuous feedback. So give confidence votes, update the way that you're working if it's running over a number of days. So learn and improve in real time. So we can do PI planning remotely. It is just a little bit more of a challenge for us. So session-based testing is the next thing that I want to cover. How are we going with the polling results?
So our polling results were at a tie between continuing with traditional test cases, and some teams are using it, but not all.
Okay, great. So that's pretty much what I would have expected. And as I said, yesterday we do still use test cases. And I'm not saying don't use test cases. There may be occasions where they are warranted, but I just want to give you an idea to experiment with something which is much more lightweight than using a test case, but it still gives the exact same coverage. It still records what you're going to test. It still uses testing techniques. But the idea of session-based testing is, as the name suggests, you decide on a session, so a period of time, a time box. You look at what it is that you want to test. So you have a plan. It's not just ad hoc testing. And I've given you an example of a plan, or at least part of a plan that we start with for looking at, in this particular instance, it's a customer login. And hopefully you can see the use of the boundary value analysis techniques. So we have our session, we have our time box, we work through our time box until our time box comes to an end. And then it's really important, and this is often a step that's skipped, we have a debrief. So we work out what we learned. Do we need to do more in that area? Maybe we're finding lots of defects. So that would indicate that we have some defect clustering and we need to look at this area a little bit more closely. Or what do we need to do next? So this is a technique I would really encourage you to have a go at. You really cut down on your test preparation so that you can focus on that test execution and giving confidence that the system is as it should be or working as it should be. But you're still having that audit of what you've tested and still having that traceability back to your user stories. So for those of you that voted still using test cases, maybe have an experiment with using session-based testing. So as I said, we are being asked to accelerate quality, but in that acceleration, we need to make sure that the quality levels are still reached. So these are some things for you to consider. We do need to use engineering principles to ensure that within the team activities, product quality is a key objective. And we're looking at each persona that we're delivering that product to and making sure that their goals are met. So things like testability, maintainability, which again reflects back to that quadrant. So there's a lot of overlap to the quadrants and the other checklists that I gave you. It's also about management, although I do prefer the word leadership because you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. And, you know, we should all be self-managing teams. So we need to build our quality in. So we need to provide that confidence right at the beginning. We're not here to be finding defects. We should be here to be confirming confidence in the system. So quality doesn't start when we start preparing our tests or when we're doing our execution. It needs to start right at planning. So talking about what are we going to automate rather than writing manual tests for. It starts at building those requirements I talked about earlier. So peer reviews and technical reviews. And we all know that finding a defect and an issue early on and fixing it has an exponential impact on costs, as in lowering the costs the earlier we find them. So we really need to be more quality coaches rather than blockers to delivery. Continuous testing. So this involves having a test process where we test early, as I've just said, we test often, and we test everywhere, and we automate. Continuous testing, though, is not about automating everything. Automation is definitely a skill that we all need to get if we haven't got already as testers. But we need to look at what is our return on investments. Where is the best place to do our automation? At the unit test, at the API level, at the service level, not necessarily at the user interface, which we all know are much more brittle. And scalability is a challenge, not least of which is the size and the complexity. But we need to make sure that our fundamental pillars within our team and the way that we test are right, and then scale those. So pilot ways of working, experiment with different ways of working, and share through things like guilds, chapters, town hall, and make sure that we are continuously integrating, because that's key when we're looking at scaling. We can't leave integration right to the end. And all of this is underpinned by an agile mindset. So these are some of the things that I've picked up. It's sometimes called soft skills. I'm seeing more and more now it's called human skills, but you definitely have to develop that agile mindset if you're working in an agile team and you're an agile tester. Trust, I think, is a challenge for some of us testers, because we have been the gatekeepers of quality, but we need to work together with our teams and trust that they are doing their best, and ask them, how can we help them? We need to have a collaborative ownership of quality. It's not the responsibility of the testers anymore, and we need to develop skills to work with our team to give that trust to our other team members and to collaborate more. And the original story that I started with, we need to give visibility on where we are, because that allows people to make those really good decisions. So we need to align back to the Agile Manifesto and on the principles, and we need to do regular health checks to make sure that we are proceeding as we need to. So very, very quickly, tomorrow, as I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but I've tried to give you what I think is going to happen and what I hope is going to happen. So there definitely will be a new normal, and I've coined the phrase better ways of working. I know there's lots of acronyms out there, but I'm hoping it's going to be a better way of working. There will definitely be a mix of remote and face-to-face. We have seen some incredible innovation and creativity, so I really hope that that is going to continue. And I have also seen empathy for our teammates. We are all in this together, and we all need to help and support each other. And lastly, this is maybe a personal one, but maybe you can also empathize with this one. Boundaries between our work and life need to be maybe rebalanced is a better word rather than balanced. So what does that mean? It means IT and testers are a part of our IT, obviously. We're mandated to make improvements. It's not just an opportunity. We need to step up, and we need to improve the way that we are working. We need to help to transform our organizations, or the organizations that we're working with. And we definitely need to put that customer experience front and center. It's not just about customer value, but it's about measuring that customer value has been realized. And we as testers are already customer advocates. So we are really well placed to make this happen. We need to start bringing that quality forward and preventing the failures and not finding defects. That makes us much more efficient. So we need to enable the business transformation. And before anyone posts, I've just spotted a spelling mistake. I know you're all testers on the line, so you would surely post about that. So apologies. So we are going to have modern technology and tooling, and we have seen a drastic change in our tooling to support our working from home and remote ways of working. There's going to be much more virtualized labs and virtualized services. We're going to see much more containerization. We are going to have to look for efficiencies and sustainability. The non-functional attributes, I think, are really going to become a much more focus and not be left until the end. We need to make sure that we are delighting our customers by giving them that reliability and scalability. So our governance models will need to change. If it takes a week or 2 weeks to go through a change management activity before a release can happen, then that's not going to delight our customers. We need to focus on what are the problems that our customers want us to fix. And we need to use intelligent automation. So automating some of the processes, so that will free us up to do more exploratory testing. So looking at using AI to create tests, to automate scripts, to find test data for us. And there's definitely going to be a rise in the knowledge worker. So we will have autonomy, diversity. We will have to be a mixed skilled team. Now, that's not to say everyone has to have every skill, but you need to make sure that you have a broad range of skills, or have some skill that nobody else in your team or organization has. So maybe if the thing that you take away from this presentation is have a bit of self-reflection. So what are you doing to deliver value to the teams that you are working with? Maybe have a little bit of a reflection about that. So as I said, please keep connected. Those are my contact details.
Are you back, Leanne?
Yeah, I got kicked out for a tiny minute there, so I'll just finish off with these slides. So hopefully I'm sharing again.
Yeah, perfect.
So as I said, we need to put the customer at the forefront. So we want our customer jumping for joy, as you can see in this little picture. What we don't want is to be releasing at the wrong time. So we don't want to be releasing downhill skiing supplies in the middle of summer. We don't want to be releasing the wrong level of quality. We don't want to be releasing the wrong product. So if our customer wanted inline skates, he's not really going to want downhill supplies. And we need to make sure we're giving the customer the right price. The value that he's going to get, that's what he's going to pay for. So in summary, make sure that we are delivering the right product, the right quality, at the right time and the right cost. So get creative, support each other, experiment, and continuously learn. So that's it for my formal part of the presentation. I'm conscious we have a little bit of time for some questions. So do you want me to stop? Or are you going to?
That's perfect, Leanne. Thank you very much for that. There were some great insights and some great thoughts and questions throughout your talk. So I will just share my screen for a moment. Now for some questions.
Okay, great.
So our first question with the highest votes of 7 votes from Samira. How to measure the quality of test cases in Agile methods?
Okay, so I'm a big advocate of not using test cases in Agile. I much prefer to use the session-based testing, so writing those session sheets rather. They're much more lightweight way of doing it, but they still provide the same level of traceability to your stories or your requirements, and you can adapt them to capture metrics around defects that you're finding, identifying defect clusters, maybe identifying areas in the software that are of poor quality. So the metrics that I prefer is not really to capture testing metrics in an Agile team. As I said, we're all responsible for quality. So let's focus on some metrics that make the whole team accountable, not just the testers. and look at that one that I talked about, your customer value and how we can realize that customer value. Let's look at things like flow through our system thinking. So flow through the way that we are delivering to our customers. Now, I do know that not all customers are ready to accept things, every minute of every day. But it is, we do need to get quicker at delivering to our customers, but delivering something that is really of value to them. Generally, I think metrics do change in an agile project or when we're delivering an agile product. But what I'm a keen advocate of is if you measure someone, that is the way that they will behave. So be very careful about what metrics you use. So counting defects, counting tests at a certain status is not something that I would advocate doing. But as a team, counting how many stories you're getting through in a sprint, I think that's a really good one. Are we getting better at delivering what we need to for our customer, and it's really giving them value? So I would turn it on its head as far as metrics is concerned and say, what behaviors do you want the team to exhibit, and then come up with a metric that is going to drive the team to work in that way. I know that didn't specifically answer test cases, but you've hit one of my burning hates, is around how people use metrics, and they're often used incorrectly to point the finger at people, and they can be very destructive to teams. So careful when you're using metrics, and like I say, use them to reinforce behavior, not as just a count.
Thanks, Leanne. I hope that answers your question, Samira. So just in case we don't reach all the questions today, we will do a blog post and we'll answer all the questions there on the EuroSTAR Huddle. So the next question, Leanne, we have is from Samira again. And the question is, are the test cases in Agile different of traditional methods?
Okay, so the test cases that I was referring to in my earlier slides are similar to those traditional test cases that you would have seen. So ones that have maybe some preconditions, they have a whole load of steps, they have a whole load of expected results. Often the tests can be, anything from 5 steps to 25 steps, and I have seen frighteningly tests that have 100 steps in. So that's the test cases that I was referring to. I was referring to test cases in traditional projects, and as I said, I'm not an advocate of continuing using that form of test case. I'd much rather use a lightweight form similar to the session-based testing. And there's plenty of templates that you can use, and I've written some articles around it and shared some templates, but they do have the same level of traceability and the same level of rigor, I guess, that they will pass your compliance inspections or your audit inspections. Obviously, you need to go talk to those teams first before you start changing your ways of working if they haven't been involved in your business transformation to date. But I have always found them really, really helpful. And hi,
everybody. We seem to have lost Leanne again. Bear with us a second. Oh, sorry about this technical difficulty. Crowdcast is surely testing us today. But just to mention again, any questions we don't get to, we'll answer in a blog post.
Okay,
Now, welcome
great.
back, Leanne.
Thank you.
Whatever's
It's giving
happening
me a
today.
hint. Yeah, it's giving me a hint to say you've
Hint to
talked
hurry
a
up.
lot. But I am conscious that we have got loads of questions. Obviously, I'm more than happy to answer questions. And like you said, we'll do a post answering some of those questions. And I'm more than happy for people to contact me directly as well.
Great. Will we finish up with just one more quick question, Leanne? Just
Yeah,
so
sure.
yeah. So
it doesn't pick me out. It seems to be the questions that are causing the problems.
maybe. So we'll make this one quick, just for everybody. So Brian says, shouldn't exploratory testing be in all the quadrants? I would have circled in middle with exploratory testing.
Great. Brilliant. So as far as the quadrants, they try to put a little bit more of a categorization on the different activities and levels and types of testing. That's one of the reasons why I'm trying to develop maybe a different way of thinking about it. But yeah, that's a really great idea. I think I'm going to move exploratory testing to the middle of my continuum. So if anyone else has any suggestions around the continuum, please let me know, because I haven't actually officially released it. So it was something hot off the press just for this presentation. So really welcome anyone's feedback. But yes, I do agree. We should be doing much more exploratory testing. And actually, I can see your thumbs up. Thanks, Brian.
Great. Thank you for all the questions, everybody. And thank you for joining. And Leanne, we appreciate your time. And thanks for coming along to this evening. We appreciate it. And I'm sure there's a lot of great takeaways for everyone. And as mentioned, we'll do a little blog post, a summary of all the questions.
Yeah, sure.
And just want to say a final thank you to our partners of the Test and Quality Summit, iSQI, for supporting these webinars. And just as a reminder, we've got our final webinar of the series with Adam Leon Smith tomorrow, and you can still register for that on EuroSTARHuddle. And just a quick mention to EuroSTAR 2020, that's coming online this November, and you can take a look at the program at eurostarconference.com. And all the webinars for the series will be hosted or be shown on EuroSTARHuddle.com. So thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a great day. And Leanne, I hope you have a wonderful evening. And thanks for coming along.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really do appreciate having the opportunity to chat with people. So happy to do it all again.
Oh, great.
Not the same
one. Great. Thank you very much, Leanne. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody. See you at the next webinar. Bye.
Bye.